understand the rupture of the Reformation, we have to examine the medieval church for what it actually was, a highly engineered, transactional logic architecture. We are focusing specifically on the Roman Catholic paradigm as it existed in the 16th century. This is the exact operational environment Martin Luther and John Calvin were born into, which functioned very differently from the modern church. This system left very little to arbitrary mysticism. It operated as a strict logic engine of salvation, processing human actions through rigid bureaucratic rules. The entire engine ran on a single foundational axiom: while God readily forgives human sin, divine justice requires a measurable temporal punishment to balance the ledger for every infraction. To process that justice, the Church constructed 3 load-bearing pillars: sin, purgatory, and penance. By mapping this theology as a socio-economic structure, we can see exactly how it governed the daily lives of millions and pinpoint the specific structural vulnerabilities that caused the entire system to collapse. The system's baseline begins at birth. Infant baptism clears a person's original sin, effectively zeroing out their initial spiritual balance sheet. The complication arises immediately after. Any sin committed post-baptism generates a new, distinct debt of divine justice that the user must pay off. The system categorized these new inputs into a strict taxonomy. First were mortal sins, severe violations like breaking the 10 Commandments. These killed the soul entirely and severed the user's connection to divine grace. The alternative input were venial sins. These were minor offenses or simple mistakes. They didn't kill the soul, but they did stally accumulate temporal debt on the user's ledger. Early users actively analyzed how to game this input taxonomy. Emperor Constantine, for example, recognized the math behind the debt accumulation. His strategy was to delay his baptism until his deathbed. He used that initial system wipe to clear all his accumulated earthly debt at the last possible second, bypassing the punishment cycle entirely. But the average medieval peasant didn't have that luxury, and they faced a fatal user-end friction. The boundary between a mortal and venial sin was entirely subjective. What one local priest considered a minor mistake, the priest in the next village might rule a mortal sin. This ambiguity engineered a state of perpetual anxiety. When young Martin Luther entered the monastery, he was known to confess his sins for up to 6 hours a day, desperately trying to cover every theoretical infraction. The inability for individuals to definitively categorize their own actions forced total reliance on the pastoral hierarchy. To survive spiritually, users had to submit completely to the Church's judgment. Because of this continuous, subjective categorization, users accumulated debt throughout their lives at a rate that was mathematically impossible to fully pay down before they died. The architectural solution to this backlog was a post-mortem holding environment known as purgatory. Theologically, purgatory is not hell. Hell is total separation from God. Purgatory functioned as a finite processing queue where baptized believers underwent physical purging to satisfy their remaining earthly debts. This painting demonstrates how this queue was presented to the public. The Church marketed purgatory as literal, agonizing fire where deceased relatives were suffering. Souls were only extracted from this fire by angels once God's demand for temporal justice was mathematically satisfied. The supreme system administrator in charge of managing this massive post-mortem queue was the papacy. The Pope held the absolute unilateral authority to determine sentence lengths, dictate how those sentences could be shortened, and issue immediate remissions to extract people from the queue. This centralized power created severe tension. Commoners endured lifetimes of anxiety to shave years off of their sentences, while watching scandalous higher clergy and popes automatically bypass the queue entirely by virtue of their office. By translating abstract metaphysical punishment into a managed finite timeline, the Church consolidated immense socioeconomic control into a single earthly office. To prevent the purgatory queue from breaking down entirely, the Church instituted an earthly release valve, the sacrament of penance. Penance operated as a cyclical feedback loop. First, the user commits a sin, and then formally confesses that sin to a local priest. In the second half of the cycle, the priest grants absolution to save the soul, but assigns physical works to pay down the temporal debt attached to that sin. These works typically included fasting, giving alms to the poor, or reciting specific prayers, but the system also co-opted physical pain. Priests routinely assigned patient suffering as a legitimate work of penance. In a medieval world without anesthesia or antibiotics, enduring a severe migraine, advanced arthritis, or a limb amputation was framed as an opportunity to make a spiritual payment against your ledger. The loop contained a strict trapdoor. If a user received their assigned works from the priest but intentionally failed to complete them, that failure instantly triggered a mortal sin, resetting the entire cycle from scratch. The original pastoral intent behind this design was protective. Local priests wanted to keep believers actively engaged in a state of grace and safely within the community fold. Regardless of that intent, the penance cycle functioned as an inescapable behavioral tether. It locked the user into a perpetual state of institutional compliance, where every action and ailment was managed by the Church. To keep this massive ledger balanced, the architecture required a final component, an economic offset designed to handle debts that were otherwise unpayable. This offset relied on works of supererogation. These were excess merits generated by elite users, saints and martyrs, who lived such exemplary lives that they bypassed purgatory entirely. The primary example is Mary. The Church taught that she lived a sinless life, meaning her assumption into heaven generated massive amounts of merit that she did not personally need for her own salvation. That excess merit did not disappear. It was banked into a centralized data reservoir known as the Treasury of Merit. The Church administration possessed the exclusive routing authority to distribute this banked merit to average users who were drowning in debt. The ultimate incentive for the average believer was that this transferred merit could theoretically shorten or entirely buy out a suffering relative's time in the fires of purgatory. The Treasury of Merit transformed abstract divine grace into a fungible, distributable currency. It primed the system for an explosive new market, the sale of indulgences. When we step back, we can see the medieval economy of salvation in its entirety. For centuries, it was historically successful. It answered the existential terrors of the medieval age by providing users with a highly structured, actionable roadmap to secure their afterlife. But tracking the flow of this system reveals its defining characteristic: absolute transactional rigidity. Every node and pathway was strictly dependent on a single central authority. The critical architectural flaw was linking the eternal destiny of the human soul directly to an earthly ledger managed by fallible human administrators. This closed-loop machine placed immense psychological pressure on the individual conscience, demanding perfect participation in rules that were inherently ambiguous. The fracture of medieval Catholicism began with the compounding internal pressure of this specific economic logic. The Protestant Reformation was a systemic fracture, the moment this specific architecture of salvation buckled under its own internal requirements.